This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The year 2019 is drawing to a close, and on this special edition of Africa Live, we take you through the events that shook or shaped the African continent in 2019. From political winds of change and the search for peace and progress, through phenomena that created scars and left many nations in tears and agony, but also the moments of pride, hope, and inspiration, the faces and features of the continent that made their mark on the world. Hello and welcome to our special edition of Africa Live as we wind down the year 2019. I'm Beatrice Marshall, live from Nairobi. We'll delve deeper into the year's events in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at what's the latest at this hour. 4 Chinese crew members have been kidnapped by pirates in Gabon's capital, Libreville. 1 Gabonese captain was killed in the attack. A government spokesperson says 4 docked ships were attacked overnight on Sunday. Security forces are working with Interpol to locate the hostages. The Chinese foreign minister says the location of the crew members remains unknown. He added that no efforts were being spared to locate the Chinese nationals. Algeria's military chief, Lieutenant General Ahmed Gaid Salah, has passed away at 79 years old. He was a main power player in Algerian politics, having played a major role in ending the reign of former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. His decision to back protesters in demanding Bouteflika's resignation was seen as pivotal. The country's President Abdelmajid Tebboune declared a full week of mourning. And Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for Saturday's attack in Somalia that killed 7 civilians. A suicide bomber set themselves off outside a hotel in the town of Galgayo. The town is in the Mudug region, located in north-central Somalia. Dozens were wounded in the bombing. And it seems there might be a breakthrough in talks on Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam. Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan have come closer to agreeing on a timeline to filling the reservoir. Sudan's water resources manager said the 3 proposals submitted by the countries showed a convergence of views on the issue. The 3 countries have been holding talks over the project in the United States. They agreed to resolving the dispute by January 15, 2020. Let's start our special segment with a look at Sudan's political transition. Demonstrations that started in December last year culminated in the ouster of longtime ruler Omar al-Bashir on the 11th of April this year. CGTN's Yasa Hakim takes us back to these events and how they shaped the country's politics in 2019.
The Sudanese people have had enough of Omar al-Bashir's 30-year rule. He was ousted after fierce public demonstrations in the first half of 2019. A power struggle followed al-Bashir's arrest. The opposition groups wanted a new constitution and democratic elections for a new leadership, while the military, however, preferred to establish a council to lead the country through a transitional period. After a series of meetings, a power-sharing deal was finally struck between both sides.
One of the most important aspects of the deal is that it sets a time limit to prepare for national elections and for establishing a government with 20 civilian ministers. It gives 67% of the government to the forces that joined in the peace talks and 33% to the forces that boycotted the negotiations.
In spite of the peace deal, there are still challenges ahead for Sudan.
Sudan needs short and medium-term plans to save the economy from bankruptcy. what we see are steps to keep the situation intact but not solve the economic crisis. They need a plan to create alternative sources of income after the loss of oil revenue to South Sudan. There is gold mining, industrialization, and agriculture. All could be important sources of income. There must be a way to create demand for the dwindling Sudanese pound. This is what's needed urgently, a clear vision for economic reforms.
2019 has been the year of change, a new chapter for Sudan. And 2020 should be the year of rebuilding, especially on the economic and political fronts. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Ethiopia has also witnessed radical and landmark reforms that placed it on the global map. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali was feted with one of the world's most prestigious medals, the Nobel Peace Prize. But the country is going through a phase that has seen bloody clashes and other threatening events. CGTN's Penina Karibe looks at Abiy's year of the Nobel.
Ethiopia and Eritrea were at war. Two nations with a shared culture and identity, divided despite their similarity and keen on decimating each other. The war between these two nations was the second of its kind since the 1978-1979 Ogaden War. That was between Somalia and Ethiopia. The cause of conflict was a border area where a town called Badme stands. This is where senior politicians, including then President and later Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, were born. For Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali, the memories are still fresh.
I was a young soldier when war broke out between Ethiopia and Eritrea. I witnessed firsthand the ugliness of war in frontline battles. There are those who have never seen war but glorify and romanticize it.
A comprehensive agreement signed between the two nations in Algiers in July 2000. The treaty ceded Badme to Eritrea. Ethiopia did not retreat, creating a stalemate. It was just Batalal. These two countries never engaged in active confrontation, but were at a state of war for 2 decades. Actually, they did engage in proxy wars by supporting armed groups against each other. But the arrival of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in Asmara in July 2018 was a moment of triumph and hope for residents of the two nations. Abiy Ahmed had delivered a first. He promised to implement the 2000 peace deal in full, thus ending a state of war between the two nations.
With the help of the strategies we set, we have become victorious in making our struggle successful. The secret of our victory was not to focus on the past history, but rather it was making our vision forward-looking and working in unity.
This reverberated across the region and the world, landing on the world's biggest platform of peace, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2019 to Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali for his efforts to achieve peace and international cooperation, and in particular for his decisive initiative to resolve the border conflict with neighboring Eritrea.
By the time this announcement was being made, Ethiopia under Abiy Ahmed was already unfolding. Immediate reforms after he took over had seen more women assume big positions in government, including the presidency. Political prisoners had been released, and those exiled urged to return home, and many did. A ban on some political movements had also been lifted. All these were achieved in months. Abiy Ahmed was also there as the situation in Sudan threatened to spill out of control. He helped negotiate a deal that saw the Transitional Military Council, which had just deposed Omar al-Bashir, reach an agreement with opposition groups, while reforms in Sudan are also progressing well. He was also at the center of another peace deal between warring factions in the neighboring South Sudan. But the arrival of the Nobel Peace Prize was the crowning moment for a region on edge. Abiy Ahmed was born to an Orthodox Christian mother and Muslim father. He is from the Oromo tribe and a career soldier. He rose through the military ranks to head the country's intelligence. He would later become Prime Minister in April 2018 amid protests from his Oromo community and the Amhara over what they termed as years of marginalization. But the Nobel Peace Prize is like a beautiful rose flower for the Horn of Africa nation. Below its attractive petals lies thorns that have been pricking the soul of Ethiopia. There have been 2 attempts on Abiy Ahmed's life. The Amhara state also witnessed a coup attempt. The newly found freedom was also playing out in an ugly way as his Oromo community clashed with other tribes in bloody confrontations. Some, like the Sidama people, seized the moment to push for their own state. This culminated in a referendum in which the Sidama unanimously voted for more autonomy. As the year 2020 beckons, an election is expected in Ethiopia. The polls will shape the country's future and its regional and continental position, but only if it is positively different from the past polls. Ethiopia has a rich past anchored in history of war and peace, and now a Nobel Peace Prize that evokes mixed reactions. Penina Karibe, CGTN.
And moving south of the continent, a severe drought from 2018 and deadly cyclones in March were ominous signs for Zimbabwe. Soaring inflation, a shortage of cash, fuel and electricity made the situation worse, and 2019 a difficult year for the country. The country is seeking recovery after years of economic decline under former President Robert Mugabe, who died in September of this year.
Jubilation at the fall of Robert Mugabe. Many thought this would mark a fresh start.
Those expectations have not been fulfilled and they will not be met in the short term, primarily because Robert Mugabe was not just an individual, but he was an institution and represented a whole system which is not so easy to dismantle, even by his own previous lieutenants.
The new administration has been dogged by all too familiar, if not worse, problems.
In the First Republic, we never had 18-hour power cuts. Now they've become a permanent feature. Fuel queues, yes, they were erratic on and off. Now, again, they are a permanent feature. We look at cash shortages. Again, it's now a permanent feature. Whichever thing you can think of, there's nothing that has improved. There's no parameter that has improved.
But President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government insists the country is on the right path following political and economic reforms.
We have walked the talk on everything that we said we will do. We've done, in fact, we've done it even faster. And in my view, really all the large, big announcements and policy reforms are done.
2 years after his resignation, Mugabe's fallout with the current administration was in the spotlight again, this time over where he would be buried following his death in September. The former leader snubbed the hero's shrine for his rural home.
As long as Mugabe is here, future people, future politicians, future historians will always ask, why is Mugabe not at the national shrine? The answer would be that he is not at the national shrine because he was removed by a military operation, and his wish was that a military must never remove a democratically elected person.
That will ensure Mugabe remains topical in the Zimbabwean story, just as much as he's the yardstick against which current and future leaders will be measured. Farengwa Kutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. The Ethiopian plane crash that left 157 people dead in March, and the fits and starts that marked the fight against Ebola in the DRC.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Boeing has fired Chief Executive Officer Dennis Muilenburg following a year of intense scrutiny and industrial setbacks following two fatal crashes of its 737 MAX jetliner. The first happened in Indonesia in October last year, killing all 189 passengers and crew. The second happened in March this year and involved an Ethiopian airliner that crashed a few minutes after takeoff from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. It was en route to Nairobi and killed all 157 passengers and crew on board. CGTN's Daniela Pearson revisits some of the major turning points of the Ethiopian Airlines tragedy.
Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 was on schedule. An international commercial flight from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia to Nairobi, Kenya. But tragedy struck just 6 minutes after takeoff. The Boeing 737 jet crashed outside the town of Bishoftu. None of the 149 passengers and 8 crew on board survived. The fatal crash occurred on the 10th of March, but it was days before family members could access the crash site. Instead of bodies, they received 1 kilogram bags of scorched earth to bury. The remains of their loved ones were still impossible to identify. Investigators start analyzing black box recorder data, finding clear similarities with a Lion Air crash in Indonesia 6 months earlier. Faults with the design of the 737 MAX 8s were linked to both crashes. In the coming weeks, fleets of Boeing's best-selling jets were all grounded, starting with Ethiopia, China, Europe, and then spreading to the rest of the world.
I speak not only with my voice, but the voices of my departed family. My mom.
Families began the lengthy court process in the US, trying to find justice for the victims and accountability from Boeing. The families of nearly 350 victims from both crashes have filed over 150 lawsuits. Meanwhile, US Congress launched an investigation into the approval process by the Federal Aviation Authority. The FDA allegedly allowed Boeing to partially self-regulate the MCAS anti-stall software implicated in both crashes. April and May saw Boeing scramble to contain the fallout, and Ethiopian Airlines denying that pilot error was a contributing factor. By June, the US plane manufacturer had set aside nearly $5 billion to support the families of victims and their local communities. Boeing is offering about $145,000 for each life lost in the Ethiopia crash. Families have until December 31st to apply for it. This doesn't include what they might receive from the cases filed in the US. The beleaguered manufacturer has been working to turn the company around, with pilot training, redesigning software, and stringent testing. But it's been struggling to re-enter the MAX 8 into service. Now, at the end of the year, Boeing has announced it will halt production of the still grounded model. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Now, in March and April of 2019, Mozambique was hit by 2 consecutive tropical cyclones that left a trail of death, damage and destruction in their path. Cyclone Idai and Kenneth left close to 2.2 million people in need of humanitarian assistance in Mozambique. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi takes a closer look at what happened.
Tropical cyclone Idai's impact came in 3 waves. In early March, the low-pressure system caused flooding in Zambezia and Tete, displacing more than 140,000 people. On 14th March, Cyclone Idai made landfall near the port city of Beira, home to 500,000 people, tearing roofs off homes and buildings.
There were a lot of classrooms that were destroyed.
Community leaders said they urgently needed food.
Finally, the weather system carried torrential rains across multiple areas, causing rivers to overflow and leaving people stranded on trees and housetops. 1.8 million people were left in need of humanitarian assistance, with 1 million children left helpless. Death toll from Cyclone Idai stood at 603, with 1,641 injured, confirmed cholera cases reported at 6,768. On 25th April, Tropical Cyclone Kenneth made landfall in Cabo Delgado province just 6 weeks after he died and was the first cyclone to make landfall this far north in Mozambique. Entire villages were flattened and thousands of people were displaced in a country that was already dealing with the consequences of drought and cyclone Idai. Humanitarian actors struggled to scale up operations in support of government-led response, but the magnitude of the devastation was simply beyond comprehension.
The water came and simply washed away everything we own.
Cyclone Kenneth left 373,000 people in need of humanitarian services, with 200,000 children in need, while death toll stood at 45 and 94 injuries in two major provinces of Cabo Delgado and Nampula. To date, people are still in need of vital assistance, and more funding is required to help families affected rebuild their shattered lives.
Analysts say that African countries are nowhere near prepared for the new climate change reality, one where dramatic weather events and volatile seasons have grown more frequent. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Pemba, Mozambique.
Now, 2019 will be remembered as the year the climate crisis devastated parts of East and Southern Africa with floods, landslides, droughts and cyclones. This left at least 33 million people at emergency levels of food insecurity. Here's Daniel Arap Moi again with a look at some of this year's environmental disasters.
Millions of people have been affected and more than 280 reportedly dead due to an unusually heavy rainfall and flooding in Eastern Africa. Across the region, homes, infrastructure and livelihoods have been destroyed and damaged in the hardest hit areas. In Kenya, the annual short rains, which ordinarily last from October to December, have been exceptionally heavy and affected more than 160,000 people in 31 of the country's 47 counties.
Over 50 people dead, including those that we cannot trace. There are about 16 people buried in the sand, in the soils.
In Burundi, 3,100 people were affected by torrential rains in Munyanga province, while in Uganda, flooding and landslides impacted at least 12 districts, including Bundibujo district, where more than 4,000 people were affected.
We want to find for you, as soon as possible, a safe space where your community and village can live. But the government cannot go it alone. We are appealing to everyone who can help in any way to kindly do so.
In South Sudan, where 908,000 people have been affected, the flooding submerged entire communities, rendering inaccessible basic services.
There is a very high humanitarian need of an intervention, especially with shelter material, with NFI kits, with material that can be given to the population because people have lost everything.
In Djibouti, the equivalent of 2 years' rainfall fell in one day, causing flash floods that have affected up to 250,000 people, including 9 who were killed. Flooding in Somalia affected 547,000 people, including an estimated 370,000 who have been displaced and 17 killed. In Ethiopia, about 570,000 people have been affected, including more than 200,000 displaced, and rains have negatively affected the harvest season. In Tanzania, the death toll is over 50,000, including 10 people who were drowned by a flood-swollen river.
According to a Save the Children count based on UN and government figures, floods, landslides and cyclone killed more than 1,200 people across East and Southern Africa.
The unusually heavy rainfall, which continued in December in most countries of the region, has primarily been driven by the positive Indian Ocean dipole. As families struggle to cope with these compounding and complex shocks, there are fears of people adopting negative coping mechanisms unless action is taken and taken now. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Let's now go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the Ebola outbreak has killed 2,200 people since August of last year. Efforts to contain the deadly disease have been hampered by insecurity in the east of the country. But health workers have managed to heal more than 1,000 people amid all the difficulties. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa caught up with some of the survivors and now reports.
A day of jubilation for survivors of Ebola in the DRC's eastern village of Mangina. They are being discharged from this treatment center where other patients were not as lucky to come out alive. According to the DRC Health Ministry, 1,077 people have been cured of Ebola since August last year. Rebecca Katungu is one of them.
I got infected with Ebola from a person who came to visit me at home. I welcomed the visitor without knowing that she had the disease. I later noticed that she had symptoms, but it was too late.
She says the disease has really changed her life.
Life has become tough. I used to be a farmer, but I no longer go out to dig because my body has become weak.
Many patients who've recovered from the deadly disease are now helping to spread the word that Ebola can be cured if treated early. Health officials have recorded a decline in the number of Ebola cases over the past 3 months, but insecurity and violence in eastern DRC could reverse the gains. A recent attack on a treatment center in the east left 4 health workers dead. The WHO says it's heartbroken by the killings and fears it could lead to the spread of the outbreak. Ebola survivors like Rebecca have motivated health experts to scale up the vaccination campaign to prevent the outbreak from spreading. But the insecurity and the anti-UN protests in eastern DRC are now their main obstacles. They are appealing to the armed groups and residents of Beni to allow healthcare workers to end the outbreak. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, let's turn to security matters now. Boko Haram's 10-year reign of terror in Nigeria has had a devastating impact on the lives of millions of people. 4.4 million people have been displaced, while an estimated 10.5 million more are in need of emergency food aid. That is according to the United Nations, which blames the insurgency for crippling the Sahel region. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza takes stock of what progress has been made in Nigeria this year in the war on terror.
UN peacekeepers and humanitarian workers in northeast Nigeria in the business of saving lives. But at the beginning of January 2019, 10 of them and 25 other civilians were killed by insurgents at a United Nations camp in northern Mali. Mali, Nigeria, Chad, Burkina Faso are countries in the Sahel region faced with a common insecurity challenge.
You have an insurgency that is primarily caused by religious extremism and has festered around countries with poor state control. You have weak governance structure such that you have large swaths of land across this region that are ungoverned, as well as millions of lives that are also without government presence.
Nigeria, Africa's most populous country, has been tackling a decade-long insurgency that began in 2009 and has spread to neighboring countries like Niger and Chad. President Muhammadu Buhari was re-elected in February on the back of promises to wipe out the terrorists by all means.
Our commitment to defeat Boko Haram and all the threats it constitutes remains as strong as ever.
Despite notable military advances and proclamations of Boko Haram's defeat by the government, the sect remained a threat to security in the northeast all through the year. By July, the country marked a decade of dealing with insurgency, with the news of 65 people killed at a funeral in Borno State by suspected Boko Haram militants.
I am begging on behalf of all of us here.
6 foreign aid workers were also kidnapped close to the border with Niger in the same month. By September, Chad, Burkina Faso and Mali had recorded some of the deadliest attacks in history, losing scores of soldiers as suspected terrorists attacked their military bases.
The United Nations has warned that the insecurity crisis in the Sahel region is reaching unprecedented levels and says there is a need for more collaboration between countries in the Sahel to end the insurgency in the region.
West African leaders held a summit in September where they jointly pledged $1 billion to better equip their forces for the battle against insurgency in the region. But security analysts say changing tactics from physical combat may go a long way in winning the war.
There has to be a collaboration between the government and the Muslim community around the Sahel to roll back some of these extremist doctrines that are only found in mainstream Muslim theology. And until there's a rollback, what you find is that for every insurgent that is mowed down on the battlefield, there are tens, if not hundreds of replacements willingly.
2019 also marks 5 years since the kidnap of 276 schoolgirls from Chibok community of Borno State. A third of those captured remain missing. And as the year winds down, their families can only hope that 2020 will not be as fruitless as the past 5 years in the search for their loved ones. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Well, it hasn't been all bad in 2019. We look at some stories that warmed our hearts, including the cafe that's giving deaf people a chance to serve, and the smart jacket that's helping doctors diagnose pneumonia in Uganda.
No one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
The Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
And we go to Kenya now, where disabled people make up around 10% of the population, but many have limited chances to access education, health and employment. Earlier this year, CGTN's Tulisha Balala took us to Palette Cafe in Nairobi, which is promoting a more inclusive society and creating opportunities for people with hearing impairment.
Palette Cafe is our little silent world, garden ambience, where there's all the love. We have a huge family, and it's all one. we decided to hire people with hearing impairment just to prove to society that these guys have no disabilities. They're just as able as you and I, and they have talents, and they need to live a fruitful life. For them to live that fruitful life, they need to be empowered. So that's exactly what we did. To start with, we had to show them how to approach clients, because most of them they're not used to being out in the front with people, so we had to bring that out of them, show them how to interact with people. Then we had to train them on the menu. Once you come in and they give you the menu, there are a few signs for some of the coffees. Actually, it's coffees and teas mostly. The signs are there. But for the rest of the things, they're numbered. Everything has a code. So in case you cannot explain something properly, you point it out to them. They always have a notebook and a biro. They can give it to you and you write down what you want. If there's any question, they'll ask you the question and you respond.
Very different from other restaurants, only because you begin to realize that there is much more ways to communicate than just speech, and the food is amazing. So I mean, and that's what your restaurant should do. First of all is to eat and to have an experience.
A 36-year-old maths and science teacher from Kenya became the first African to win the prestigious Global Teacher Award. Peter Tabichi has ambitious plans to use the $1 million prize to improve the lives of his students and the community around his school.
Peter teaches at a school in Kenya's Rift Valley region. Many here are peasant farmers struggling to make a living. Education provides a beacon of hope. So like his father before him, Peter decided to become a teacher.
Really, teachers struggle a lot to ensure that good things happen. My father was a teacher, and it's like he used to inspire so many people. And not only other people, he also inspired me. And through his great work, I felt that like teaching profession is really something nice that I also need to really do in the future.
Peter is also a Catholic priest. His main goal is to improve the lives of those around him inside and outside the classroom. Each month, about 80% of his salary goes towards community projects. He runs a peace club at the school and coaches his students in sciences. He also teaches the community about sustainable farming methods. On this day, Peter Tabichi's life changed forever. At a ceremony held in Dubai, the 36-year-old Kenyan science and maths teacher won the Global Teacher Prize 2019 and was crowned the best teacher in the world. It was a proud moment, one that he hopes will trickle down to transform the lives of his students. And with a Global Teacher Prize of $1 million, he is about to scale up his projects. First at his school,
I cannot solve all the problems facing the continent, facing the world. I'm just going to do a few things here and there that other countries, other people will look onto. So food insecurity, I'll try to initiate a project like kitchen gardening, growing of drought-tolerant crops, so that it will be one way of addressing that food insecurity.
And then at his community.
We don't have enough classrooms. We don't have laboratories. We just have one which is used for multi-purpose, for chemistry, biology, physics, all the science subjects. So I'll try to ensure that they have all of those facilities and they are well equipped.
Every year for the next 10 years, Peter will receive $100,000 in prize money.
Thank you, Your Highness.
He believes the prize
And
belongs to
Sunny
the
Ethiopia
community,
continued
and
support
through
of the
his
teaching
projects,
profession.
the best teacher in the world this year hopes to share his success with them. Wilkis Anyawa, CGTN, Nairobi.
Well, one of these stories that had people talking in 2019 is this one from Kenya's Kibra settlement in Nairobi. One organization is helping residents to tell their own media stories.
Just as I'm reporting for Shen Kibera TV, Nairobi.
My name is Sylvia Diambo. I'm 13 years old. I come from Kibera, Nairobi, and I'm a journalist, I'm a reporter, and also an anchor.
Shine Kibera TV, it is a program that we are running that is giving students from Kibera an opportunity to practice journalism. Our students actually become real journalists. We have a presenter, we have reporters, we have camera people, and me as the producer. Most of the students who grow up in the slum, they have like a low self-esteem because they feel like they don't get enough opportunities compared to the rest. They feel like they are kind of inferior. But they are unique in their own way because the talent is universal. I wanted to raise their self-esteem, to improve their confidence.
I do photography, videography, and editing. I love videography because it involves a lot of traveling, then finding new things every day.
We are actually the people who grew up here, who are born and raised here. We are the right people to tell our own stories because we understand the challenges better, and we can actually say these are the solutions that can work. Kids, they are the best people to work with because they learn very fast, they understand very fast, and they are ready to get into any challenge. The kids right now, they are employed. They are teaching the people, they are passing information, at the same time they are getting money to support their education. I'm looking at building professionals. It is not bad to pass some skill, your skill, to the younger generation because they are the future.
Never give up, no matter what happens. And if you have a talent, come out because you don't know where that talent of yours can take you tomorrow.
And in Uganda, an engineer is helping doctors quickly diagnose pneumonia. Brian Turiabage is a co-inventor of a biomedical smart jacket which detects pneumonia faster than a doctor. Pneumonia is an acute respiratory infection affecting the lungs. It is caused by viruses, bacteria, or fungi. The World Health Organization says the disease kills 500,000 children in sub-Saharan Africa alone.
Pneumonia, a leading cause of death among children under 5 years of age, causing roughly 1 million deaths every year worldwide. According to the WHO, only in sub-Saharan Africa, this severe lung infection kills 500,000 children under the age of 5. However, pneumonia deaths could be averted if caretakers recognize the symptoms and danger signs promptly. this forgotten killer of children kills 24,000 Ugandan kids under the age of 5 every year, many of whom are misdiagnosed as having malaria.
When the children have a fever or feel unwell, most parents think about malaria. And then it is after that they found there's no evidence of malaria that eventually they think of other causes. So by that time, the children are quite sick when they are brought here.
We came to Kampala, where a team of Ugandan engineers has invented a smart e-jacket that diagnoses pneumonia faster than a doctor.
I am Brian Chiawaje, and I'm the Chief Data Scientist with Mama Op Medicals. That is a startup that is working on a biomedical smart jacket to diagnose pneumonia in children aged below 5 years. Within my mind, I always wanted to do something that was unique, something that would end up being special. Because I would look around my life and I realized things were not moving at a pace which I thought they should be moving. And me being in engineering, I thought of if I grew up in that kind of career, I could set up like some of the next leading technologies within the country or even the world at large. One of my friends called Olivia, who happens to be part of the Mama Op, who is the CEO of the Mama Op Medicals, had a grandmother who had died of pneumonia. And the whole reason is that she had been taken across several clinics, several hospitals, which were not offering the best attention. Until her death, that's when the prognosis reports indicated that she had died of a pneumonia. And the challenge there was, why had she been taken across all these clinics, all these hospitals, but they couldn't find out the disease? So that's when we thought of using the same kind of experience we had before, whereby we wanted to put our engineering knowledge into work. We saw it as a challenge that we could try to innovate around, and we sat down together and brainstormed on several things, and that's how we came up with the idea of making up the jacket. And surprisingly enough, we found that actually many more kids, many more children are the ones who die because of pneumonia, simply because they have less immunity and they can easily be killed by any foreign disease which kills very fast. So we had to look for a quicker solution to put it to an end. And that's how we came up with the whole entire design of having a jacket that can diagnose pneumonia faster than what the doctors in the rural health settings can do. This jacket, it helps health workers and doctors in quickly diagnosing pneumonia. And how it does that is that it looks out for the vital signs, for the critical signs of the pneumonia disease from a child. All the person has to do, what the doctor has to do is to get this jacket, tie it around the child's body, and then click the sensor which ignites the process of recording the information from the child's body. Within just a period of 1 minute, this jacket is able to pick out the vital signs such as the respiratory rate. It's able to sense whether the child has any abnormal lung patterns. And after that, it sends a final result on a screen before a doctor or health worker. So that way, they're able to easily determine whether the child is having pneumonia or not. So it kind of easily makes their work very easy, and they go on with the rest of the work. They're able to treat the child, they're able to either refer them to another nearby hospital for quick attention.
Most cases, the diagnosis of pneumonia in this country is a clinical one, but I think it requires to be confirmed with a chest X-ray. So depending on what time or where you are, because most people live in rural areas, and the rural areas may not have ready access to chest radiographs. And even if they did, the people who are there to interpret the radiographs are not that many. So what we think is will be reliable if we can rely on that technology, and it helps people to diagnose pneumonia without need of moving to a district hospital, then get the case done, then get it interpreted. I think that will really help us to save those lives.
When we return after the break, we'll bring you some of the big winners in the world of sport in 2019.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes. How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa.